on 87.8 Shuttleworth FM. That is where you'll be able to hear the flying display commentary from 2 o'clock onwards, and it's also where you can now hear our pilot chat, because normally we'd have someone talking to you about a particular aeroplane from a position on the flight line with a little loudspeaker next to them, but of course, in order to remain COVID compliant, that's not possible at the moment, so we're doing them over the radio station instead. And it's being recorded for posterity for you to be able to listen to after the event as well. And we have a very special guest today to kick off our pilot chat for 2021. It was in 2015 that one of Britain's most famous warbirds, the Battle of Britain veteran Hurricane Mark I R4118, was put up for sale by its previous owner, Peter Vasher. Someone saw it who decided to take more than a passing interest in the advertisement he saw. A software entrepreneur by the name of James Brown. A deal was duly concluded. James became the new owner of R4118 with a vision, if it proved possible, of learning to fly it himself. Well, the obvious route to take towards that end was the North American Harvard, having initially undertaken tail dragger training on lighter types, but of course the Harvard, the great stepping stone onto the front line. James duly acquired a Harvard from a private owner in Sweden, had it beautifully repainted into wartime colours, and it's that aircraft with which he makes his flying display debut today. James, a very warm welcome.
Ben, thanks very much. It's great to be here.
We've spoken a little bit there about R4118 and your journey to flying it, but of course you consulted a lot of experts, didn't you, at the time you were getting into warbird ownership and talking about that potential to fly it yourself?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I started off having read the article which featured R4118. I think I was on a flight across the Atlantic at the time, yes, and probably had a couple of glasses of wine at that stage, and it felt like a really good idea right then. But I did chat to a few people around the community. Pete Kinsey actually was very helpful. Yes. And I said to him, look, Pete, is this a completely insane idea? Or is it really feasible for somebody like me, I'm a PPL,
yep,
to make the step up and fly something like the Hurricane? And he didn't laugh. He didn't sort of tell me I was an idiot. But he said that, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to fly one, that's the right aeroplane to start off with. But clearly the step from flying a Cessna 182 to flying a Hurricane is there's quite a few steps actually. It's an interesting challenge.
One of the first of those steps was that initial tail dragger training on the Cub.
That's right. Yeah, I did that down at Clacton.
Yeah.
So spent a great week down there flying their Super Cub, and actually did the short strip, the field strip course as well. That was just such a lot of fun. And I think one of the things that's characterised all of this journey has been that every step has just been great fun. I haven't been in a rush. I've just tried to enjoy each step as it came along.
That's absolutely one of the key points, isn't it? Because I know from when we were in touch a few years ago, and you were then beginning the tail dragger training, I think it was around that time, you were in no hurry, and you also came at it with the view that you might not be able to do it, which is possibly just as important, isn't it? That you're not absolutely convinced, yes, I can definitely do this.
Yeah, I think at no point in the journey, up until the point I flew it, was I absolutely certain this would definitely happen. I think as I made my way through that journey, and it was Cub to Chipmunk to many hours in the Harvard, all of which have been incredibly valuable. We'll talk about them, I'm sure. It's all been a lot of fun. And I think as I made those small steps, the goal of flying the Hurricane gradually became more realistic, I think. And so finally, actually flying the Hurricane was just another one of those small steps, although you can't get away from the fact that it's R4118.
Yes,
so
of course, yes.
Yeah,
it must always be in the back of your mind somewhere. Was the Harvard a daunting prospect on that very first acquaintance that you had with it?
It really was. I mean, having flown the Super Cub, I think I did about 75 hours in a Cub, and then flown about 25 hours in a Chipmunk. I mean, the Harvard is big.
Yes.
It's big. You're a long way up. There's a lot of inertia. It's very heavy. It's loud. So it's an exciting prospect. So the first couple of flights, you're just way behind the aeroplane.
Yes.
The systems are fairly complex, and there's a lot going on takeoff and landing. And as you'll have heard, you don't stop flying the Harvard until it's in a hangar, put away, and the doors are shut. I mean, it can always come back and bite you. So it was pretty daunting.
Where was your first Harvard trip from?
Actually, the first one was out at Stallion 51 in Florida. So I did about 10 hours over there. And then I came back to White Waltham. My aeroplane, actually, we'd been restoring it and repainting it. So I think it was probably early 2017 by the time I flew my one. And that first trip was at White Waltham. And Peter Tuplin is actually here today. He flew over with me, helped guide me through those early flights up to Solo.
It's often been said that that old cliche has been used that the Harvard is an easy aircraft to fly but difficult to perfect the flying of. Was that very much your impression as you worked through, or is it more nuanced than that?
You're sort of implying I've perfected it. But I'm a long way from that. I think like any really great training aircraft, they are relatively easy to fly, but I think quite hard to fly really well.
Yes.
Landing it is always... focuses the mind. But once it's in the air, it flies absolutely beautifully. It loses energy quickly in aerobatics, so that's something that needs managing.
Yes.
But generally, it's a lovely aeroplane to fly, well harmonised, just great fun.
Yeah. What were the key learning points from your Harvard training, the sort of one or two things that you would take away above all else from that process that then led on to the Hurricane?
I think there are a couple. Certainly keeping your feet very lively, particularly on takeoff and landing, that's critical. Because if anything's going to go wrong, it's probably on landing. So making sure that right up until the moment the airplane stops, you're on top of it. Because once it starts to depart, if it wants to begin to ground loop, there's a lot of inertia there, so it's hard to stop it. So you need to be on top of it. I think the other thing probably is just being really accurate with speed, especially on final. Again, if you have too much energy as you touch down, it tends to skip and float. And actually, the same is true of the Hurricane. So those two things I think are really important. But from the point of view of transposing to the Hurricane, it's a brilliant model.
Yes.
Because it flies in a very similar way. The airspeeds are not that dissimilar. The view forward's very similar as well. So you can see why it's such a great stepping stone to the Hurricane.
Very good. And the two big things that have happened in the last couple of years, of course, almost in tandem, have been converting to the Hurricane, which occurred when?
That was November 2018.
Yeah.
And that was up at Duxford.
Yes.
And it happened on a Saturday morning. And actually, I'd taken Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off work to be there and to do my final Harvard checkouts and then go and fly the Hurricane. But the weather didn't play ball.
Yeah.
So on Saturday morning, I'd actually arranged through a good friend of mine, Johnny Cracknell, to meet Archie McInnes.
Yes.
And Archie McInnes was a Battle of Britain veteran. And actually, he'd been shot down in a Hurricane in 1942 over North Africa. Shot down by Messerschmitts and sadly lost an arm in that accident.
Yes.
But we sat him in the aeroplane early in the morning on a Saturday, and all the stories came flooding back. So to listen to Archie's experience was phenomenal. And then the weather suddenly cleared. So I went for a quick spin around the block in the Harvard to check it was okay, and then went off and flew the Hurricane. I think I will be the last person ever to solo a Hurricane, having been briefed by a Hurricane Battle of Britain veteran, which is a real thrill. I mean, that was a fantastic day.
Yeah. And the other thing in parallel with that was starting training towards getting your display authorization from the CAA, initially on the Harvard. So when formally did you begin that process?
I think probably about this time last year. And actually the big step for me was going and doing the aerobatics course with Ultimate Aerobatics over at White Waltham. And that started in the Extra.
Yes.
And that's just a phenomenal aeroplane. So again, another one of these examples of every step has been lots and lots of fun. So started in the Extra and then worked to put a display together in the Harvard. And actually Dodge Bailey, who everyone knows very well here at Shuttleworth, agreed to be my mentor. So he mentored me through the process. And actually I got my DA in the Harvard in October last year.
Yep.
And I've just renewed it again a few weeks ago with Dodge. So the plan really is to just enjoy flying the Harvard, hopefully enjoy displaying it. The first one, as you say, is today.
Yes.
And then at some point, again, no hurry, step up to the Hurricane and do a display in that.
marvellous. The training for the DA, you've definitely got one of the best mentors in the business. Again, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned through this part of your journey?
I think there's quite rightly, a lot of regulation and control around how we display here in the UK. So I think in tandem with the flying, which in many ways was a fairly easy extension from flying the extra, really understanding the way the regulations are implemented and how you display aircraft safely, I guess, has been one of the key things.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's about the accuracy and it's about safety, which is absolutely as it should be. So putting all those things together has been an interesting experience.
And we look forward very much to seeing the result of all these endeavours later on today.
Well, I hope I haven't built it up too much.
Well, it's very, very good of you, given the fact that it must be, even the number of practice displays you've done, a big thing to do your first public one. All the better to have you come and talk us through beforehand.
Thank you. I can't think of a better place to do it than Shuttleworth. So thanks very much, Ben.
Thank you. James Brown there from Hurricane Heritage, and we look forward to seeing him in the Harvard for the first time later today.